Admiral Thorne stood at the helm of the Vindication, watching as his crew prepared for the impossible task ahead. They were headed straight for the heart of the Qatar Fleet, an armada that outnumbered them 100-1. His second-in-command, Ryder, grinned despite the tension crackling in the air. "We're ready, sir," Ryder said, his face tight with anticipation. "Good," Thorne replied, his voice low and calm. He glanced at the bridge where the lights had dimmed as the ship transitioned into combat mode. The hum of the hyperdrive filled the air, a low, resonant thrum that sent a jolt of adrenaline through everyone on board. Thorne took his seat, his fingers drumming on the armrest as he surveyed the scene. This was where he thrived, on the precipice of battle, where the stakes were highest and there was no turning back. "Let's remind these aliens why they should fear us," Thorne said, his voice carrying the weight of countless battles. "We're not just fighting for Earth, we're fighting for our very existence." The Vindication lurched forward as the hyperdrive engaged, the stars outside the viewport stretching into thin lines as they accelerated to faster-than-light speeds. The countdown to their arrival ticked down on the display, each second bringing them closer to the Qatar Armada. Thorne leaned forward, eyes locked on the screen. "They think they know us," he muttered, his gaze hard. "But they're about to learn the truth. Humans don't just survive. We thrive when everything's on the line." With a jolt, the ship dropped out of hyperspace, and the Qatar Fleet appeared before them. It was a massive wall of ships, an impenetrable fortress in the void of space. Thorne's smile widened, fierce and confident. "All batteries, fire at will," he ordered. The Vindication's guns roared to life, launching a barrage of plasma fire at the enemy. The Qatar Fleet reacted quickly, their ships moving in perfect synchronization, their firepower converging on the lone human battleship. But Thorne was ready. "Evasive maneuvers pattern Delta," he barked. The Vindication veered sharply, dodging the first wave of enemy fire with precision that belied its size. Plasma bolts and ion beams sliced through the space where they had been only moments before, but the ship danced through the chaos, a predator weaving through its prey. "They're trying to box us in, sir," Harris called out from engineering, his voice tight with tension. Thorne's eyes darted to the tactical display. The enemy was moving to encircle them, their ships forming a net that would crush them if it closed. But Thorne saw an opening, a small gap in their formation between two cruisers. "There," he pointed, his voice sharp. "Helm, course 320 by 517, maximum thrust." The Vindication angled sharply, diving toward the gap. Qatar fighters swarmed around them, peppering the shields with rapid-fire energy blasts. The ship shuddered as a direct hit rocked the starboard side. "Shields down to 60%, Harris reported, sweat beading on his brow. "Hold steady." Thorne's voice was unshakable. "Gunnery, fire torpedoes." The ship's torpedo tubes spat out a rapid series of warheads, each streaking toward the two Qatar cruisers ahead. The enemy ships tried to maneuver, but the Vindication's targeting systems were faster. The torpedoes struck home, detonating in bursts of light that tore through the cruiser's armor. "Cruisers disabled, sir." Ryder's voice was triumphant. Thorne didn't waste time celebrating. "Push through," he barked. "All power to the engines. Get us out of this pocket before they regroup." The Vindication surged forward, blasting through the gap in the Qatar line. Behind them, the enemy ships scrambled to close the breach, but the human ship was moving too fast. They had broken through the first line, but Thorne knew the battle was far from over. "They're regrouping fast," Ryder warned, his voice carrying a note of concern. "We can't keep this up forever." Thorne leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing as he assessed the tactical situation. They had proven their strength, but now came the real challenge, turning this small victory into a decisive one. "We don't need to keep this up forever," Thorne replied, his tone ominously calm. "We just need to break them." Ryder frowned, not fully understanding. Thorne tapped a few commands into his console, pulling up a new set of coordinates on the display. It was deep inside the Qatar formation, near the heart of their command structure. "We're not here to fight their entire fleet," Thorne explained, his voice gaining an edge. "We're here to cut off the head of the snake." Ryder's eyes widened. A decapitation strike. It was audacious, risky, and exactly the kind of move Thorne was known for. "What's the plan?" Ryder asked, his voice hushed. Thorne's eyes gleamed. "We go in fast, hit them hard, and take out their command ship. Once it's gone, the rest of the fleet will fall apart." The Vindication turned sharply. setting a course directly for the heart of the Qatar formation. The enemy ships scrambled to block their path, but Thorne's crew didn't flinch. "Brace yourselves," Thorne said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of the coming storm. "This is going to get messy." The Vindication surged forward straight into the heart of the enemy fleet. The Vindication hurtled toward the center of the Qatar Fleet, its engines roaring as it accelerated to maximum speed. The enemy ships moved to intercept, forming a blockade in a desperate attempt to stop the human warship from reaching its target. "Enemy destroyers moving into position," Ryder shouted over the din of alarms blaring throughout the bridge. "They're forming a wall." "Divert auxiliary power to forward shields," Thorne commanded, his voice steady despite the chaos. "We're punching through." The ship shuddered as it took hit after hit from the Qatar destroyers, their plasma bolts hammering the Vindication shields. But Thorne's focus was unshakable. "All hands prepare for impact," he said over the comms, his tone firm. "We're going in hot." The Vindication plowed ahead like a battering ram, smashing into the blockade with unstoppable force. The shields flared as they absorbed the brunt of the enemy fire, but the ship pressed on, tearing through the enemy lines with relentless fury. "Shields down to 30%, Harris reported from engineering, his voice strained but controlled. "Hull integrity is holding, but we're taking heavy damage." Thorne's eyes remained locked on the tactical display. Ahead, the massive Qatar command ship loomed on the viewscreen, its dark hull bristling with weaponry. It was heavily armored and surrounded by a swarm of escort ships, but Thorne was undeterred. "Helm, bring us within 1 kilometer of the target," Thorne ordered. "We need to be close enough for maximum impact." The crew exchanged tense glances. They knew what Thorne had planned, and they understood the risks. The Nova Cannon, the Vindication's most powerful weapon, was their last resort. A massive energy beam capable of ripping through even the toughest armor, but it required precision, and firing it at such close range was a gamble. As the Vindication closed in on the command ship, the Qatar ships intensified their assault, desperate to stop the human ship from reaching its target. The bridge shook violently with the force of the impacts, consoles sparking as systems began to fail under the strain. "Sir, we're in range," Ryder called out, his voice laced with urgency. Thorne leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Fire the Nova Cannon." The ship's lights dimmed as power was diverted to the massive weapon. For a brief moment, time seemed to stand still. The universe itself held its breath. Then, with a blinding flash of light, the Nova Cannon unleashed its fury. A searing beam of energy erupted from the Vindication, slicing through the Qatar command ship's shields as if they were made of paper. The beam bored deep into the alien vessel's hull, and explosions rippled along its length as its power core was breached. The resulting detonation was cataclysmic. The command ship erupted in a massive explosion, the force of the blast tearing it apart from within. Shockwaves rippled outward, slamming into nearby Qatar ships and sending them spiraling out of control. For a moment there was silence on the bridge of the Vindication. The massive Qatar command ship, the linchpin of the enemy fleet, had been reduced to a cloud of debris. "We did it," Ryder whispered, his voice awestruck. "Sir, the command ship is destroyed." Thorne nodded, his expression grim. "We're not done yet. Without their command structure, the fleet will be in disarray, but they're still dangerous. We need to mop up the remaining ships before they can regroup." The Vindication turned sharply, its guns blazing as it tore into the remaining Qatar vessels. Leaderless and disorganized, the enemy ships were no match for the human warship's precision and firepower. One by one, the Qatar vessels were obliterated, their wreckage drifting aimlessly through the void. Minutes felt like hours as the battle raged on. But slowly, the tide turned in humanity's favor. The Qatar, once confident in their superiority, were now being systematically annihilated. Panic spread through their ranks, and what remained of the fleet began to scatter, retreating in a desperate attempt to escape the human onslaught. "Enemy ships are retreating," Harris called out, a note of triumph in his voice, "and they're breaking off." A small, satisfied smile tugged at the corners of Thorne's lips. "Pursue them," he ordered. "I don't want a single Qatar ship making it back to their homeworld." The Vindication gave chase, hunting down the fleeing enemy vessels with ruthless efficiency. Thorne's orders were clear. This wasn't just about winning the battle. This was about sending a message to the entire galaxy. Humanity was not to be trifled with. Hours later, the final Qatar ship was destroyed, its wreckage joining the countless others scattered across the battlefield. As the last enemy blip disappeared from the tactical display, the bridge of the Vindication erupted in cheers. The crew had done the impossible. They had faced an armada alone and emerged victorious. Ryder turned to Thorne, his face flushed with the exhilaration of victory. "We did it, Admiral! We actually did it!" Thorne's smile was faint but genuine. "Good work, everyone. You've made history today." The crew continued to celebrate, the tension of the battle finally giving way to relief and pride. But Thorne's mind was already turning to the future. The Qatar had been defeated, but they were just one threat among many in the vast galaxy. Other alien species would take note of what had happened here, and not all of them would be deterred by this show of strength. There would be more wars, more battles to fight. But Thorne was ready. He had seen what humanity was capable of when pushed to the brink, and he knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would be ready to face them. As the Vindication turned back toward Earth, leaving behind the wreckage of the Qatar Fleet, Thorne allowed himself one final thought. "We gave them war," he murmured to himself, the weight of his words hanging in the air. "And if they come back for more, we'll be ready." With that, the Vindication jumped to hyperspace, disappearing into the stars, leaving behind only the echoes of a battle that would be remembered for generations to come.